Scholar is not an exact translation of the Arabic term ālim, just like saint, saint, is not an exact translation of the word wali. When these terms are used interchangeably, especially when someone identifies as a scholar of Islamic studies or speaks about contemporary or medieval ulama, it is important to clarify the differences. The Arab poet said, ألم ترى أن السيف ينقص قدره إذا قيل إن السيف أمضى من العصا. Do you not see that the sword is diminished in value when it is said that the sword is sharper than a stick? So the point here is that some comparisons fail to capture the true stature, reality of what is being described. So difference number one I wanted to highlight here is that is in length and structure of training. In the Islamic scholarly tradition, the training required to become an ālim is typically far longer and more layered than modern academic training in Islamic studies. Without addressing the content or its intellectual relevance, the time commitment alone is significant. Studying a single discipline, علم واحد, a single discipline such as fiqh, which is only one of the at least say 20 or 30 core disciplines in the traditional curriculum, can take 5 to 7 years, if not more. 5 to 10 years. When we add other fields such as usul al-fiqh, like more technical studies, more interdisciplinary fields such as usul al-fiqh, theology or kalam, the sciences of the Arabic language itself, the study of asanid, it needs a lot of patience and presence, asanid, ilal, and other hadith sciences. So the scope becomes far broader. Difference number two I wanted to add here is is connected to depth, depth of study. The depth of study is also difficult to compare between many modern academics and classically trained ulama, such as faqih or faqih. Not a faqih as a position, like in North Africa, in some parts, some regions they use faqih to mean an imam, right, the leader of a Muslim community. Here I'm referring to faqih in its original significance or identification, which means a trained ālim, usually or often qualified to issue legal opinions or fatwa. So a modern scholar might hold a PhD in Islamic studies and specialize in a field like Islamic finance, right? But the training is often intiqai or ikhtiyari, selective. I personally completed a master's degree in Islamic finance while simultaneously attending training at Al-Qarawiyyin and other madrasas, studying chapters of Islamic law related to transactions, uqud, muamalat, and contracts from the Quran, the Hadith, and classical fiqh texts, while with traditional ulama. This experience allowed me to compare, right, the two systems. While modern academic study was certainly useful, it was often superficial, I would say, in its especially in its engagement with classical texts. التعامل مع النصوص التأسيسية أو الأولية. القرآن حديث روايات مأثورات أخبار نصوص الفتاوى etc. Manuals of fiqh and usul and etc. So the engagement was limited. Many modern scholars of Islamic studies, whether in Islamic finance or hadith studies or Quranic studies, struggle to read and properly understand classical works, even when they are native speakers, native Arabic speakers. So it's not always a problem of language mastery. It's about the understanding, being immersed in the language and the spirit, and the methodologies followed, the adab sometimes of that field. So yeah, they struggle to read and properly understand these works, and even when they they try to explain or convey or when they want to produce or reproduce their own interpretation, they often fail, or they often come up with a limited perspective. I'm not saying it's not useful, it's not beneficial, but it's often biased, limited, and superficial or shallow. And this is largely because traditional scholarship requires a gradual progression, tadarruj, from concise mutun textbooks to intermediate manuals to eventually large encyclopedic works, الموسوعات والمطولات والمبسوطات. And skipping these stages يؤدي إلى الحرمان. It leads to حرمان. It creates gaps in understanding and engagement. The third point I wanted to highlight is the training of the ulama is not, again, without endorsing, without saying that this group is better than the other, right? Just telling you, trying to describe and analyze really, really briefly the situation, the reality of the two camps, or the two approaches. The training of ālim is not limited to textual study. It is comprehensive, معقد, مركب. It includes the mastery of texts, language, النصوص, اللغة, analytical tools, وسائل, علوم الآلة التي تسمح بالتحليل, to contextualize, to apply, but before that, contextualize, understand reality, circumstances, the different opinions before producing a new, or eschewing a new fatwa in terms of, we are dealing with fiqh, for example, contemporary, related to contemporary issues. So the training includes all these, النصوص, اللغة, analytical tools, pedagogy. You understand how things work, how you receive and how you teach. Often modern scholars in Islamic studies do not know how they teach these things. So they just try to read, to break down texts and describe, usually from secondary sources, imitating Orientalists or translated works, or even when they deal with primary sources, as I said, they explain this, they convey these ideas and these realities and these methods in a very limited way. A traditional training offers pedagogy as well in the package. You receive also you learn how to teach that, how to convey that, all while watching your own teachers, because the relationship between the العالم الفقيه and the طالب is is beautiful, very often intimate. It's sincere. It's based on mutual respect, and it's not based on authority, as we often see and hear from distorted sources, unfortunately. I said that the training includes pedagogy, analytical tools, text, reading, and memorization, language, both theoretically and practically, and the ethical and spiritual dimensions of the ilm we study. طلبة العلم and the ulama often choose that path, the long journey of studying this ilm to become a ālim, for the sake of knowledge itself, right? For the spiritual satisfaction, and to live according to the values of that knowledge, right? We memorized the line or the verse of Ibn Raslan, who said, وَعَالِمٌ بِعِلْمِهِ لَمْ يَعْمَلًا مُعَذَّبٌ فِي النَّارِ قَبْلَ عُبَّادِ الْوَثَنِ. وَعَالِمٌ بِعِلْمِهِ لَمْ يَعْمَلًا مُعَذَّبٌ مِنْ قَبْلِ عُبَّادِ الْوَثَنِ, something like that. Right, so these طلبة العلم and the ulama, they don't study to teach. They do, and they don't teach for money, and they don't conduct this research. There is research as well. They're not just receiving. They're not just as some say, they are just indoctrinated, receiving information without analytical or critical tools. So they study and teach for the values, for the tradition itself, and not for publications or for positions or for money, right? And this gives knowledge another dimension, actually a lost or forgotten almost dimension of knowledge. So we find the pleasure in understanding knowledge per se, in its complexity, depth, and ethical applications. Students are trained not only in ilm, as I said, and knowledge, but also in adab. You can say adab is the scholarly discipline and character, and the spiritual dimension of knowledge or ilm. And from a modern perspective, I know that some may view these methods as outdated, right? Yet, having spent time in both academic and traditional scholarly environment, I have been able to observe the differences, and that's why I wanted to share them with you. One maybe final noticeable challenge in modern academic settings is that a difficulty many students have with hifz, memorization. And again, hifz is a tool, right? Is a pedagogical wasila. It's ala. It's without internalizing the texts, it becomes harder to deeply reflect on the meanings, or to respond to questions with evidence and amthila or shawahid, examples. A memorized text continues to work within the mind and soul of the talib and the ālim for years, and this allows us to um, and to create a intimate engagement with the tradition. Of course, modern training does not focus on this dimension. It's not a priority for it, for the market. That said, memorization alone is not kafiya, right? It's not sufficient. And we can even say that blind memorization, al-hifz al-a'ma min ghayr fahm, without the guidance of a ālim, without the guidance of a qualified and trustworthy teacher, can also lead to misconceptions and even to radicalization, to tatarruf. And in our traditional system, memorization is always murafiqa, accompanied by the development of interpretative tools, ethical and spiritual dimensions go hand in hand all together through comprehensive, rigorous study across multiple levels. So there is also a tadarruj. So it's like it works like horizontally. It's comprehensive, and vertically it's spiritual and ethical. Many Islamic studies scholars are in fact half-trained ulama, and this unfortunately deprives them from smelling العلم. لم يشم رائحة العلم. قالوا هل رأيت بعينك طالب علم؟ أو قال الآخر لم يشم رائحة العلم. They unfortunately never smelled ilm, and this is dangerous. I'm not saying this to create any negative atmosphere or comparisons. I'm just saying that I want to first correct the difference, the translation, highlight the importance of clarifying the differences between the two terms when used, and also to highlight the dangers of this kind of incomplete, unfinished, or limited training. It's dangerous. It can lead to extremism in religion, as it can lead to extremism in atheism, and both may incite hatred, divide communities, and even incite or lead to violence. The same is true with the movements, Islamic movements that dismiss and ignore and skip centuries of intellectual tradition and scholarly training, reducing Islam to a single exclusive interpretation or a sect that claims to represent true Islam. And unfortunately, modern academic training in Islamic studies leads to this dilemma. Thank you, and see you next time.